Hi, good afternoon, everyone from London, and good morning to all of those of you listening in from the USA. Thanks very much for joining us, and welcome to this, our first GAD webinar of 2018. For those of you who aren't familiar with our brand, GAD is the original airport privatization and investment conference, and we've been tracking airport ownership, investment development, and strategic trends around the world for the last 25 years. My name's Sophie Milton, and I am the strategic director of these conferences. And we're delighted that in this, our 25th anniversary year, we're able to bring the event to the US in June in partnership with Denver International Airport, particularly at a time where there's so much going on in the US market, where the FAA is making changes to facilitate airport privatizations, where there are many significant airport development projects on the horizon, and that established airport business models are facing increasing competition in every market around the world. So before I welcome our guest, I just wanted to say that we will be answering any questions that you have at the end of our discussion. So please do feel free to submit them at any point via the webinar portal. We've already had one or two, so I look forward to receiving a few more. I'm therefore delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Patrick Heck, Chief Commercial Officer at Denver International Airport. Patrick's been in financial and strategic roles in aviation for almost 20 years, both on the airline and airport side. He's been in his current role at Denver since 2016 and is responsible for all airport commercial revenue programs. Now, this includes the retail, F&B, commercial property, car rental, parking and ground transportation businesses, as well as being in charge of airline affairs and air service development. So he's expertly placed to give us some genuine insights into how the airport business is evolving and what are Denver's strategic priorities, what challenges and opportunities lie ahead for the business. So welcome, Patrick. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Sophie. It's great to be here. And to all my U.S. colleagues who I got to know in my first tour of duty here at Denver Airport, and now being back, it's wonderful to be back here in the U.S. and back in the airport industry and back at these airports that we all love. So it's my pleasure to be here and be on the phone with you all today.
Yeah, because we first met, I think you came over to a GAD in Europe, I think some point between sort of 2008 and 2012, and we met. That was during your first stint at Denver. Well, how did you end up find yourself at Denver Airport in the first place back in 2006?
Well, like a lot of people, I started in the aviation industry right out of grad school, and it very quickly got in my blood. I started with United Airlines and worked for them for about 6 years, and absolutely loved working with an airline, working in this industry, and had an opportunity to come to the airport in 2006 after having worked at United for 6 years. And the more you work here and the more you're in this industry, the more I think you just get to really love it. And so I've been now, in the industry for almost 20 years as a result, and particularly like the work that we've done here at Denver and how we are positioned for growth in the future.
Yeah, because you were at Manchester Airports Group for a while too, is that right?
I was. In my brief, I'll call it walkabout after leaving Denver Airport, I worked at a real estate developer here in Denver for a bit, but also worked for Manchester Airport Group in their USA business as they were trying to grow into the U.S. market as well.
I mean, I know anecdotally that you worked on the financing for the hotel that we're actually using as our venue for GAD Americas in Denver. So you have very extensive financing background on the infrastructure side, which is obviously great for us. So tell me why this is such an important year for Denver Airport, and how come there is, you're opening your doors to the GAD community next month.
Yeah, I mean, I think not unlike a lot of my colleagues around the U.S., a lot of us are really starting to see growth rebound in the U.S. and seeing the U.S. carriers in particular have very good financial results, and seeing the domestic part of those financial results actually be a big driver of what's helping them grow at this point. And so, as a result, we're seeing tremendous growth in Denver. We grew at 8% in 2016, grew over 5% last year, and are seeing significant growth again this year. And because of that growth, and a lot of it coming in the domestic market, it's put challenges on us that are, while great challenges to have, are challenges nonetheless. For people who've been around the industry for a while, people are going to be shocked to maybe think about the fact that Denver is going to celebrate its 25th anniversary in 2020. And so we're now almost 25 years old. The years of being the brand new airport with all the space and capacity, we're now full. And what we're seeing to do is have kind of embark on our first major expansion of the airport facilities since the airport opened back in 1995. And so with that growth has come a lot of different opportunities for us to expand the airport. We are fortunate that we sit on 53 square miles, about 137 square kilometers of land. So we have the room to accommodate this growth, but we have to figure out how we're going to do it. And so we've been looking holistically at our entire program of between gates and security checkpoints and trains and roads and runways and taxiways and de-icing facilities. I could go on and on that you are all very familiar with, but it's how do we keep all of that in balance and make sure that to accommodate this growth that we aren't just accommodating one way, that we accommodate across the board. And so our kind of plans over the next 5 years really are about addressing that growth and making sure we're building the right facilities to accommodate that. There's two major projects that people may be familiar with. One is we are embarking on a 39-gate expansion of the airport, which is about a 30% expansion in our number of gates that will take place over the next few years with them opening by 2021. And then the second big project that we will probably talk more about here on the call is our terminal project, where we're going to renovate our Great Hall and change the layout to kind of reflect the changes in the industry and how people use airports, how people interact with terminals and ticket counters and security checkpoints to make sure that we have the capacity we need to accommodate the traffic growth that we are expecting.
And how do you see the dynamic of that traffic growth changing? I mean, obviously it's a very positive story right now, and it's at a steady pace. Do you see that increasing both domestically and indeed internationally? I know that you've been launching a lot of new routes. I myself are coming over on, direct on Norwegian, which is obviously an interesting new airline business. How do you see that continuing on and the dynamics evolving on the airline side?
We're expecting to see growth in a number of different fronts. One is people who follow the industry know that we have three kind of major carriers here, all with different business models. United Airlines is our biggest carrier, have a hub here in Denver. Southwest Airlines grew from just starting a few flights in 2016 to this being their third or fourth biggest station now in their system. Then we have an ultra-low-cost carrier, Frontier Airlines, that made that move to becoming ultra-low-cost a few years ago and has now kind of figured out how to work that business model. So we've got three very different major carriers working different business models, and so they're all growing in different ways. So the growth is about accommodating them. United, for example, has indicated that they've got a strong desire to grow their mid-continent hubs, Denver being one of those. So that creates certain types of facilities that we need to build to accommodate those connections. But when you look at what's happening here is, while our growth overall is strong, it's actually international growth that's growing faster on a percentage basis. Admittedly, international traffic accounts for approximately 5% of our traffic, but on a percentage basis, it's growing faster. We've launched, as you mentioned, 2 new routes to London between Norwegian and United, starting service to Heathrow this year. Norwegian started service to Paris. Edelweiss will be starting service to Zurich here shortly. WestJet started service to Calgary, so that international growth has been particularly strong for us over the past couple of years as the local Denver market has continued to grow as well.
And has that, because it must be a very interesting challenge accommodating the growth of these three very different models. I guess if you're lucky that you have the space to expand, but I would imagine that that's been a very difficult interesting challenge for for the design of the project in order to accommodate those different needs. I know that there's a very different arrangement that we have with our airports and our airlines in Europe. I mean, would you like to sort of explain how that dynamic works a bit for some of our listeners in from European markets?
For sure.
In terms of the way that the gates work.
You bet. It's not a one-size-fits-all for sure. They do have different business models, but the U.S. business model is also a bit different in how airports operate versus how the agreements with airlines may work, say, in Europe or around the world. We generally have a use and lease agreement at an airport that dictates how charges are set for airlines, how rates are set for them, and so on. And then each carrier is treated largely the same under those rules. So we don't have different business deals necessarily with these different airlines here in Denver. So we're not necessarily building purpose-built facilities for the different carriers, but what we are trying to do in our designs is make sure what we build is flexible to accommodate those different business models. So Frontier's got maybe a different way of approaching their connections than, say, United might, and so we want to make sure our facilities allow for both of them to connect their passengers appropriately. One of the things about Denver that has been such a nice luxury for us since the airport was built was that it was really built with the future in mind to make sure that we weren't precluding changes to the industry. I think the one thing we all understand and know, everyone on this call, is that the industry is very dynamic. It changes. The way airlines operate today is much different than it was 20 years ago, and having a facility that is flexible to accommodate that is really fundamentally important to us here. So even as we're building the Great Hall and building these gates, it's building in the flexibility to allow the industry to adapt and change so that we're not stuck with something that doesn't match what the industry needs, say, 10 years from now.
Because I guess one of the conversations that we always have at GAD is to what extent can that physical infrastructure be dynamic? There's a limit to how much you can change that infrastructure. But I guess with new technology governing how you manage, airside equipment, how you manage all the different operational sides, making it, I guess, leaner, cleaner, faster. I presume that those are things that you're building into the flexibility, the future-proof side of the new operational structure.
Yep, that's absolutely right. Physical assets that you're building that are 30, 40, or 50-year assets, whatever they turn out to be, are hard to make sure that they are flexible enough. So you do have to build it. It's got to be there. And how your airport's designed kind of dictates a bit about what you can do next, unless you're going to tear it down and start from scratch. And so what we do is kind of build the base facility kind of as it needs to be built, given kind of our layout and structure, but then try to build in whatever flexibility we can. And, it comes in the form of small nuances to, future-proofing and putting in the structure for a future mezzanine over a certain area if there needs to be an airline club, for example, rather than having to go back and retrofit that, later on. So it's just little things like that throughout our design process and our thinking that really help position us to make sure that when the growth comes, or if it comes a different way, we can accommodate it appropriately.
Well, and your airline partners must be delighted with the new developments. I mean, to what extent have you been working with them, in terms of their involvement in the designs, requests, all those sorts of things? How's that worked out?
They have been intimately involved, particularly our bigger carriers that are needing more facilities here. But honestly, all of our carriers here that we have coming in have been a big part of what we're designing. We have to make sure that what their needs are being met. So, throughout the process for the Great Hall design process we've been going through since it was approved, as well as our design process for our new gates, there are very regular, and I say very, every week to 2 week check-ins and meetings where we discuss what it is we're doing, how we're planning it, to make sure that the nuanced details of their operations are reflected in the designs that we put forth. The last thing we want to have happen is we open up a new facility that has a fundamental flaw because we didn't ask the detailed questions throughout the design process.
Yeah, you certainly don't want to find that it's not suited to their needs, when you've got to the final stages.
Right.
I just want to ask a quick question about, obviously, the growth and the route development. I mean, you mentioned, obviously, there's a lot going in Denver. How is Denver as a city, as a location, influence, again, that drive towards growth as well? I mean, I know that there's an excellent railway connection from the airport to the city. And that must be a big part of the growth too.
Yeah, just about 2 years ago, we opened a rail link to our downtown, which can be, you're there in about 35 to 40 minutes from the airport. So that certainly, it was a key, necessary thing to put us on par with what I would consider the great international airports around the globe. That connection has been a very helpful thing to us. But overall, the growth that's being driven here at the airport, and I think a lot of people are surprised when they hear this, has been driven a lot by the local economy growth and the growth in population here. Denver's traffic, almost 65% of it is local O&D traffic, people starting or stopping a trip here, and about 35% connecting. And I think when most people thought of Denver when it was being built, as well as throughout the years, viewed as largely a connecting hub, and indeed it was designed to be about a 60% connecting hub, but it's remarkably been much more successful on the O&D side. And so that's what's driven a lot of our growth, and why the market then has remained strong, even through maybe some downturns in other economies around the country. And so what that creates, though, is then different challenges for us, where the Great Hall and the Jefferson terminals are a really good example that it was a place that if 60% of your traffic was going to be connecting, there was going to be less need to make investment there. But because we had more people starting and stopping trips here, it put more strain on that infrastructure, which caused us to have to do something different to make that facility work over the long term. So you have to be adaptable and change to the market as it comes along.
Yeah, so tell me a bit more about the specifics of the Great Hall project.
Sure. So the Great Hall was designed really to do a number of things, but from the things we've been talking about here is, certainly as the security footprint has grown, the process for security has changed as new technologies are coming in and so on. It created the need for us to grow our security checkpoints as we see this growth coming. So we needed to find more space to put more security. At the same time, airlines are using ticket counters very differently than they were 25 years ago when the airport was designed and built, as you're all very aware. And so that put us with kind of a extra space in that area. So what we looked at were ways we could leverage that extra space to somehow get us the security checkpoint we need, the security space we need for our checkpoints. At the same time, we knew that the Great Hall itself was not necessarily a place that people wanted to stay because they were largely trying to get through security and get up to the concourses. So we're trying to make more of the environment there post-security so that when people come in, they go through security, they can actually linger in this, what is an amazing civic space with the tent roofs and the open feeling to it and all the light that comes in, that people will be able to spend more time in once they get through security. Secondly, there was just a security issue as well. I think we're all unfortunately aware of how airports can be bits of targets from time to time. And the way our security checkpoints were designed with our queues down one level from a kind of balcony level where people could see over, you were very much felt exposed in those lines. So we wanted to take care of that problem at the same time. And, so when you kind of start putting all those together, it pointed us to a very specific kind of way of designing and putting this project together to address all of those concerns. I think lastly, and this isn't lastly because it's not as important, but there's just this need and desire to create great spaces, great amenities, great things for our customers, for our passengers who are here that, the airport experience can be a bit stressful and hectic for them, and we were trying to find ways to do this that would make it a much more pleasant experience in that part of the travel journey for them, and this project will certainly have a lot of that as well.
I mean, there seems to be a kind of romantic nostalgia about the fabulousness of air travel in 20 years ago, and I see very much a driver to bringing that back. Obviously, there are the concerns there on the security side. There's obviously the practical operational challenges that you need. But I mean, do you see this as a competitive imperative now to make sure that your passengers are have a nice experience or somewhere where they feel that they can relax and actually enjoy that part of their journey?
Absolutely. I think when I think about the airports I like traveling through around the world, is they're not just public utilities that are there to facilitate someone getting through a series of checks to get on an airplane. And I think there was some amount of that happened in the airport industry for a number of years. But when you look at good things happening here in the U.S., good things happening around the globe, airports are becoming much better destinations. And I think even our partners at the airlines are understanding now that what they do at the airport can have a huge impact on how their customer perceives them as an airline as well. So, airports have a huge role to play then to kind of make that journey better. And the other thing, just from a very practical, the commercial side of me says that happy customers who like the environment they're in are much more likely to spend money. And so let's get them to spend some money by giving them, making them feel better just about the environment, but then also offering the types of things, the parking products, the retail shops, the dining outlets that they want to see at airports now.
And what's your feeling on how those businesses are developed? Because I know a key challenge in the States, for example, are disruptors like Uber, for example, encroaching on future car parking revenues. What's your feeling on how passenger behavior is going to evolve in terms of how much money they want to spend in the shops or how they will be getting to airports? How's that been built into into the strategy, into the design of the new terminal?
I think the short answer is we've been thinking about it and trying to design it in. If I had the answer as to how exactly you have to address, say, Uber or the attack from Uber, I think I could make a lot more money and probably tell airports how to do it. So there's a lot of unknowns to what we're talking about. And I think what we've talked a lot about here, there's going to continue to be disruptors, and what we have to be able to do is be flexible and start offering those things. Right after the 9/11 attacks and the security changes and things like that, there was a lot of discussion around what was going to happen, and what actually happened to airports, it created opportunities for new, much better, much improved retail and dining, for example. And I think the same thing can be said with Uber and Lyft. As they become more prominent, it will force us to talk a little bit about how we offer parking and what types of parking we offer and how we offer it and that kind of thing. So I think you have to view those disruptors as just, they are what they are. You can't stop them from being there, but what you can do is adapt your business model to make sure that you're able to compete. And so all the things we're talking about here with our new designs, with our expansions, with our kind of future, what we want the airport to go, kind of keep that in mind. One of the things we talk about is our autonomous vehicles, and what is that going to look like if someone's car drives into the airport, then drives itself home and parks in their garage. It doesn't mean that person's not traveling. It just means they're going to be interacting with the airport a bit differently. So let's make sure that we are thinking about the types of things we could be offering to, A, protect our revenues, but B, also give that customer what they want.
Yeah. And I would imagine that kind of data, gathering data and those parts of the equation now will be a key factor going forward in understanding those behaviors and those requirements that passengers have in future.
Yeah, absolutely. Data is key to it. And generally speaking, we're in a data-rich environment. We have to start collecting the right data and interpreting it properly. But I think generally we can get to that information, and there's so many more tools now to get to that than there used to be, that if you can get it, you can start making the proper decisions.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the Great Hall project, obviously, people have been interested in the operational the model that you've gone down, just in terms of your international partners, obviously involved with Ferrovial Airports on the one side, the Saunders Construction Group, obviously a US group, and investment from JLT Infrastructure. What do you see to be the advantages of having such an interesting and diverse partnership with this particular project?
So there's a number of reasons why we pursued that approach, and I will say each airport's going to have a different reason to pursue projects like this. So there's not kind of a one size fits all here, but I think there's sometimes this perception that the reason P3s are done is because there's just money needed, so therefore you do a P3, and I think that's not really the way P3s are necessarily done on either side. That it's not because someone has to place money or someone needs the money. That can be a reason, but it wasn't the big reason why we went down this path. I mean, first of all, it's not an easy thing to do to take an operating terminal and completely revamp it. And so there's a lot of inherent risk there. And so one of the questions the airport had is, do we want to take that risk on, or would we rather have that risk potentially be transferred to a partner via some other type of agreement? And so, that's one reason to potentially do it. We also talked a lot about the notion that there are really, really good things happening around the globe right now in airports. And those airports that do things well aren't necessarily always in the U.S. So there was this idea that we could get some really good information and knowledge transfer from a great airport operator to our airport here in the U.S. market as well. So that was another reason to pursue this. And obviously Ferrovial has done some very good work at the airports they own throughout the globe, and we're a good partner to do that. So so there's a number of reasons, but those were some of the big ones that drove us to take this approach, with the risk transfer and just getting that kind of knowledge transfer into our airport as well.
Well, I see that the time is ticking on, and we've got several questions in. Before we go to the questions, I'd like to just ask you, aside from Denver, which one's your favorite airport that you fly in and out of on your travels? I mean, you can mull over that one whilst we do the other questions if you like.
Great. I will mull that over, make sure I don't offend anybody before we take questions.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, mine is obviously Gatwick, because it means I'm coming home, which is a soppy answer, probably not the best, but it may well be Denver once I come, when we come through. But let's go to our first question. I'll just do them in order in which they've come in. So, first question comes in is the strategy that Denver's taking on regarding your air surface development, is this to attract more international business?
So the short answer is yes. We'd love to have more international business, but our strategy is really kind of more of a balanced strategy. Because Denver by itself is not a market that will support a bunch of international flights with people traveling to and from Denver. And so one of the things that we've also focused on is our domestic connectivity, which really helps the locals who need to get to these different places around the country. But I think as importantly, it's that connectivity then that from the markets that can connect into an international airline. So for example, we might be the only place where you get service from a very small town in southwestern Colorado, but that provides one more connection that can work to help support an international flight or another flight to another location in the U.S. So, international is certainly the one that gets the attention. It's certainly the ones that bring the biggest impact to not only the airport but to the region. But the strategy really focuses on building that hub and connectivity to make those flights that much stronger.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds like it's a really important core of the business. Okay, so moving on to a strategic question around growth at the airports itself. What's the strategic view on airport equipment? So in terms of congestion, managing congestion, capacity, safety, reliability, where does this fit within the growth strategy?
Clearly all of this stuff is necessary to make it work. So from an equipment perspective, the first thing that we're really talking about now is how do we make sure we've got the space necessary to allow the equipment to be here, whether that be tugs or whether that be, automatic, things that guide the planes automatic, whatever it happens to be that we're talking about is making sure that the space is there to allow it. Baggage systems are another thing that we've talked a lot about. Those of you who followed Denver for years know that famously, the airport was delayed in its opening because of a baggage system that struggled to work properly. But new generations of that now work pretty well, and so we're looking at ways to incorporate that in as well. So all of that is part of the thinking here. There's not any one particular aspect that we focus on more than others. They all are kind of part to make the whole system work.
Yeah, so it's really a holistic view, all of the different aspects, because I suppose where you have a hiccup in one side, it will then have implications throughout the whole chain.
Correct.
But it's certainly, again, another interesting area where people are looking towards new technology to really try and streamline all those big operational challenges. Because it's unlikely that someone's going to reinvent baggage handling processes, in the next 6 months. So. And there are those certain fundamentals that you just need to get right. Okay, next question would be, are you more in support of revenue generation at the Great Hall or at the concourses?
I won't say I'm more in support. I'm in support of just extra revenue generation across the whole system. The way our deal was structured with Ferrovial and the partnership that went in there is we actually see 80% of that revenue that comes to us as the airport. So we have a very, very strong interest in what the revenue comes there. So again, what we're trying to do is make sure that the Great Hall and the terminal offers the passengers and customers what they need in the Great Hall and terminal to make that the best thing possible, and the same thing on the concourses. So we're trying to balance that so we can maximize the revenue generation from all parts of the airport, not just from one or the other. But given the way that we're structured, we have some pretty well aligned interests with the Great Hall to make sure that that's generating the revenue it should as well.
So there's no particular view on which poses the better opportunity or the greater growth on either side of those.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Another question. So I have a question coming in from India about regulating airport revenue. How are revenue streams regulated in the US? In India, we have the DGCA. What would be the equivalent agency?
Well, there's two different ways I'll talk about this. One is when it comes to the airline revenues, what the airlines pay to operate our airports, and then there's the airline side. And the airline side, to call it regulated is probably maybe not quite the right term, but certainly there are a lot of rules and legal issues surrounding how you can set up a structure of how you charge airlines, and that's dictated by the Federal Aviation Administration. So we as airports have to follow those and make sure that we're not discriminating against carriers, that we let all carriers come that can operate and so on. So from that side, we're somewhat regulated, but each airport enters its own business deal with the airlines based on the airport's needs and the specifics of that market. So the deal I have here is very different than the deal in Dallas or Chicago or San Francisco or you name any other place. They all have their different nuances. but they are regulated by the FAA. On the non-airline side, there's much less what I'll call regulation. We are able to put in the restaurants we need to and charge for parking what we need to and so on. And each local jurisdiction has got to figure out how how their local rules might apply to that. But there's not a strong regulation as to what we can charge and can't charge for, say, for food and beverage, for example. So a little less regulation on that side of the business.
Okay, great. So I think we've got time for one final question, which is an interesting one. Again, we were talking about the relationship with Denver as a location. So this question is about how does the airport interact with the local community from a corporate social responsibility perspective with regards to airport development?
Yeah, I mean, airports in the U.S., local communities, they are very important aspects of what happens in the local community. Big economic drivers. The economic impact of Denver is north of $26 billion a year to the state of Colorado's economy. So it's a big economic driver. And while each airport's different in the level of support it gets from its community, there are some communities where the noise the airport creates can be an issue. There are some communities where they fully support the airport and really help drive the airport's needs. That we happen to have that here in Denver. So we are very engaged with the local community. We also have a lot of programs, what we call disadvantaged business enterprise programs, but also programs that are designed to allow the local community to be a part of the economic success of the airport. We have a number of small businesses out here that operate concessions or that are part of our contractual services that are building things or our janitorial services, whatever it happens to be, that participate. And that's a really important thing for us. It's an important thing for the people we work for, which is, in our case, happens to be the mayor of Denver, who are elected officials. And so it's a big part of our thinking and kind of the daily discussions that we have around our overall strategy.
And how does the relationship work with, again, other airports in the state, other airports in Colorado? Again, does your growth and your success impact sort of competitively? Does, obviously you were talking about the hub model and the fact that the local routes are so important. How does that is it a competitive or more of a supportive environment from that perspective?
I'd say largely we're supportive of each other here. I mean, there's a number of airports in the state of Colorado that have flights that can connect into the major hub in Denver, and that's why the flight works. And so I think overall you'll see that the competitive landscape of us competing against other airports is maybe not as strong here as it might be other places in the U.S. or other places around the globe. Not to say there's not any competition, say, between us and our neighbors to the south in Colorado Springs or something where an airline could put one plane in either place. But I think largely what you see is a strong cooperation among the airports here because it's a network that really makes all of us better by having all these airports throughout the state.
Definitely. Great. Well, we're actually over time now, so I wanted to thank you very much for answering our questions so comprehensively, Patrick, and also, thank you so much for hosting us in Denver next month for GAD Americas. We really look forward to coming out and, seeing the city and sharing in the expertise of your upcoming projects. I know that you've been an attendee at our European events on and off for the last 10 years. What does it feel like having us all come over to Denver?
We're very excited. And then I have to say to my colleagues on the phone who have not ever had the chance to visit a GAD event is they're great events. They're focused on airport strategy and the kind of the bigger picture issues that we all think about and face. And that's why I think we were so excited to be able to host it here, partly because it's a great event and we'd love to have everyone come and experience it, but also because I think you'll all find if you haven't been to Denver, say even in the past 3 years, there have been some major changes in the downtown area where we're hosting this. And it's just a very thriving, vibrant community that I think would be a fun place for all of you to come. And there just happens to be up next against a weekend, so you could even stay for a weekend and go to the mountains and have some fun if you'd like. So.
Fantastic. Great. Well, thank you so much. All of you that are listening online, we do have a quick survey that's going to pop up on your screens any minute now. I'd be grateful if you would just answer those few questions and give us some feedback. Thanks again, Patrick. Thanks to you all online, and we hope to see you in Denver in a month's time.
Thank you
very much. Bye-bye.